of the comments that we received late last year and making some updates. But I'm happy to be with you today. So I'm just going to, okay. So for those of you who are new to the project, I just want to kind of reaffirm what Bus Revolution is. It's a blank slate redesign of our entire fixed route bus network. SEPTA's never done a project like this before. We have made changes. We've tinkered around the edges. Typically, we've made more changes in the suburbs than in the city, or in the counties than in the city, I should say. But overall, we've never looked at our system holistically. Certainly not at any point recently. And we're doing this for a few reasons. But the region has changed, the city has changed, the way people have moved around have changed. SEPTA stayed largely the same. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, but every transit agency really does need to, every few years, take a look at how the system is performing as a whole. Look at trends, look at how people are moving around, look at what's changed, and kind of identify ways to make their system more effective and more responsive to what people are looking for now. The big catalyst for this project is ridership. We started looking at the potential of a system redesign in, I would say, the mid-2010s, 2016 around, because we were noticing that ridership was going down every year, and the ridership, it was going down everywhere in the system. It wasn't like we were gaining ridership in some areas and losing it in others. Ridership was just down across the board. And, during that time, we were like, well, we should take a look at our system as a whole. We should start, identifying and programming changes in. We have time to kind of reverse this trend. Operating costs were going up, traffic congestion was getting worse, and it just spoke to like a lack of usefulness in our overall bus system. So we wanted to do a redesign, or at least to explore the possibility of a redesign to kind of reverse this trend. Obviously, in 2020. COVID happened, and we are still very much recovering. The pandemic really exacerbated the issue. It changed travel patterns. It really altered what we think of as traditional peak travel. And while bus ridership is returning, it's still about 30 to 40% below 2019 levels. So you can see on this chart sort of where we were in 2013 and where we are now. Bus ridership has been more resilient than that of other modes. But we are still way below where we need to be. We're lagging behind a lot of other regions in terms of transit use, and we really need to figure out a way to get more people using the system more often, or else we are going to have to start sort of unilaterally cutting service across the board, which is something we are desperately trying to avoid doing. But where we are in the process is we're sort of hovering in this sort of draft bus network, updated draft network part. We started in 2021. We did a detailed analysis of the existing system. We did an initial round of public outreach in the fall of 2021, asking people a series of questions about transit trade-offs. We did a survey that was online. We did a phone bank survey. We used that as a way to kind of construct two different scenarios that we shared last spring. We did engagement through summer of 2022. And again, we shared these two different scenarios with people asking for input. We took that input, and last fall, we shared a draft bus network, and we did it through a series of virtual meetings like this, as well as in-person meetings throughout the region. I think we held 22 or 23 in-person pop-ups. We held 13, virtual meetings. We spoke at, I don't know, dozens of other meetings. We were very busy. We got a lot of feedback. We got over 5,000 comments. Just online. We got a lot of comments, at our meetings, and we have begun reviewing all of that feedback in plans of updating our draft bus network to get ready to share later in this year, probably in the spring, March, April timeframe. We will do another round of engagement, and I'll get more into what you can expect through the rest of the year. But this is where we are now. Public input is really important to the process. We want people to feel like they have an open line of communication to the project team, and that we can respond to those. We can't always give people what they want, but we need to make sure that we review the comments, that we understand what people are saying, and that we try to make adjustments where we can. So I'm going to go through the redesign at sort of a high level, and then I'll talk about the county specifically. So overall, this is sort of a quick summary of what the new or what the draft looks like compared to the existing system. There are fewer bus routes overall. This is a data point that a lot of people have really jumped on. Totally understand. But there's a much higher level of overall frequent service, so a higher quality of service throughout the system. Almost half of all of the routes are frequent, which means they come 15 minutes or better 7 days a week, between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. We are also proposing to introduce some microtransit into our family of services. I'll talk about microtransit specifically in a little bit, but this is a big departure, but I do think it's a realistic interpretation of what kind of transit services are useful in certain types of areas. Fixed route bus service is not a good fit everywhere, and I think we have to accept that. But I think it's important to note that we're shifting services around, where some routes are being eliminated, that kind of thing. But overall, it is a flat number of service hours. We are not looking to decrease the number of overall service hours. We're not looking to decrease the amount of service that we have. We're looking to reallocate it in a more useful way. Want to note here that while we are removing a lot of bus routes from our stable, 99% of people that are within a quarter mile of transit will still have access within a quarter mile of the initial proposed network, and 97% of people that are within an eighth of a mile will still have access. So I do think that it's important to note that, even though the system looks a lot different, or the proposed system looks a lot different, we are still providing a really high level of overall access to people. One of our key goals is to increase access to opportunity. We want the bus network to connect people to jobs and to appointments and to wherever they need to go. And what the next couple of charts show you is how the draft network compares to the existing network in terms of access to frequent service. We do think frequency is the key to generating higher ridership numbers. More people have access to frequent service. There are more jobs within a quarter mile of frequent service. More low-income residents have access to frequent service, and more minority residents have access to frequent service. So these are all really important goals of the system. And this is measuring that access weekdays at noon. And then you can also see that on weekends, there's an even greater increase in the number of people. One of the things that we're trying to move towards with this system is a 7-day-a-week system. SEPTA has typically run a very much less service on the weekends than on the weekdays. That's particularly true in our suburban communities. That is not the case with the draft. We are looking to reallocate a high number of resources to weekend service, to later service, to overnight service. So this really does, try to help people when they need to travel the most and when, they don't have any other options. And then finally, the increase in the number of hospitals and schools to frequent transit is also much higher. This is something that we heard a lot from people. They want to be able to get to hospitals. They need to be able to get to school. So we want to make sure that people can access those key destinations using the system. So now I'm going to go through the changes in Delaware County. Again, these were the changes that were proposed last October through December. We have begun the process of making some adjustments to these based off the feedback that we've gotten, but we're not done that process. So typically, one of our biggest service areas in the county is and around Chester. We have a lot of ridership in Chester, connecting people both in the city, but also to locations outside the city. So something that we've done here is to try to add, consistency and frequency. So we have introduced 2 frequent routes coming into Chester, one traveling along McDade Boulevard and one traveling along Chester Road and Baltimore Pike. These would be 15 max routes. So again, 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. These are our 2 highest ridership routes that are not in the city of Philadelphia. They have higher ridership than many city routes do. So we want to make sure that these routes have good service and good regular and reliable service. We also are proposing to make a number of other changes in and around Chester, but a lot of it is really about providing higher levels of consistent service. So these would be 30 max routes where you see the teal. This is again 30 minutes or better, 7 days a week between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. This is a much higher level of service than a lot of these areas get now. But we think that there are clear benefits to city residents and to people coming into the city, to access resources there. Again, they're typically built along where current routes run. We're not really realigning a ton of service as much as providing higher levels of frequency, doing some consolidation of services, that type of thing. These are some of the proposed changes in and around Chester. There is still good service to the airport. There is still service, to Wawa. There's still service along Conchester Highway. So we're trying to, make sure people can get to the places they need to get to. We also have a lot of service built in and around Westchester Pike. Westchester Pike is one of our key arterials. There's obviously a lot of destinations along Westchester Pike. There's also a lot of reverse commuting going out to Westchester Pike. So a lot of people coming from the city will change over at 69th Street from the L or from another bus route and then connect to bus service along Westchester Pike. So we are providing service along Westchester Pike. Again, we're trying to consolidate some of that service into, one or two more frequent routes. So we have a 15 max and a 30 max route going along Westchester Pike. And then we have a 30 max route that connects at Newtown, or that connects at, through Delaware County Community College and then out to Westchester. We also have a frequent route, 716 up here, which is the 105. I know this is largely in Montgomery County, but it does touch a little bit of Delaware County at 69th Street, and it could be a benefit to residents. But overall, again, it's about providing regular, reliable service, even if it's a 30 max service, to locations in the county, and being able to connect, as seamlessly as possible. Something that people may have come to you about is we are trying to build a more interconnected system, which would likely feature higher levels of transferring. One of the keys to that is providing more regular and frequent service. That's really what makes that type of system work. So we are looking at pretty large increases in frequency overall, where we've retained service. And then finally, I do want to highlight a microtransit zone that we are proposing in the county. It covers the Wawa, Painters Crossing, and Cheney University area. It would connect at Wawa Station. Obviously, we have our new regional rail stop there, and we have bus routes terminating there. And then microtransit would come, and people could travel down through Painters Crossing and then up to Cheney. And I'm going to talk about microtransit in a little more detail right now. So this is something that again we are proposing to introduce, and we're excited, and we're working really hard to kind of get this stood up as part of the Bus Revolution project. Microtransit, if you haven't heard about it, it's zone based on demand service. It's for point-to-point trips, technology enabled, so it's typically app based, although we will always have a call center option available for people. It will be run by SEPTA vehicles, like it'll have a SEPTA, it'll be SEPTA branded, SEPTA livery, and then it'll be driven by SEPTA operators. So we are in the process of creating a new type of operator designation for this type of service, and it's transit fare. So not more expensive than the bus, it's the same price as the bus, and the transfers between are free, just like from bus to bus or bus to L or bus to high speed line. How it works is a passenger books and pays for their trip through the app. A computer program will assign the trip to a specific vehicle and will schedule the trip. A computer lets the rider know when the vehicle will arrive and confirms the pickup location. The rider walks or rolls to the pickup location and gets picked up by a transit vehicle, which is typically a van or a small bus, not a 40-footer. There may be other riders on board, there may not, it depends. And then the rider would get dropped off at a location. The trip is complete. It typically is more successful in areas where there's low density but high need. So you've all probably seen charts like this before. Fixed route transit does kind of require a density of stuff, whether it's people or jobs or what have you, to be successful. Microtransit is sort of a way to plug gaps where density is low, demand is low, but need is high. it becomes a less competitive service in moderate to higher density areas, because in those areas, demand would just overtake the system. So where you see it throughout the region is areas where that are typically hard to serve with fixed route transit. We don't view it as an urban mode. The fact of the matter is the way that suburbs have grown and developed are not typically friendly to transit. Buses have a hard time getting in and out of developments. They have a hard time getting in and out of shopping centers. But people need to get to those places, and they change often. So fixed route transit is not such a great option there, but this type of service would be more useful. It's different from fixed route and ADA in a few key ways. Microtransit, it could be a front door pickup like ADA, but typically it's at a nearby intersection or a bus stop or sort of a like a key destination, like a train station or a rail station. People can ride within a defined zone. So if you're in sort of the zone I shared before, the Wawa zone, you could travel within that zone, but you can't travel outside of the zone. So it's really part of that. It's really part of a fixed route network for the most part. It's not like ADA where you can travel, throughout the region. As long as you're within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route stop, you are confined to a zone. You can book trips the same day, so it's not something you need to book in advance. Anybody can ride it, so you don't need to qualify. If you're within the zone, you're qualified, you can ride it. It will be accessible. It will be wheelchair accessible. I believe there will be bike racks on it for people who need to use a bike to complete their journey. And at times you will be riding with other people. It depends on how many people are using the system, where you're going, etc. Some of the strengths of a microtransit system are, it's convenient. People schedule the trip when you need it. You can track your trip in real time, like Uber or Lyft. You know where the vehicle is, how long it'll take to get to where you are. It's easier to take short trips. The vehicles are smaller, accessible, and it accommodates suburban land use. Like I said, we can't fit 40-foot buses everywhere, and this is a way for us to provide service in areas where people want to get to, but we can't necessarily accommodate them with a fixed route. There are some trade-offs here. There is a digital divide here. It is easier to use a cell phone app. We found that people, when we've talked to the public about this, people are generally comfortable with that idea because people do use Uber or Lyft, but there are people who don't use those services, who don't use smartphones. There will be a call center option, but you don't have the real-time function with that. So, it is easier to use the app. There's a learning curve. I mean, the thing that's great about a bus is that it's big. You see it, it's got SEPTA on it if it's not covered in ads. So this is less vehicles. So there's a big educational component to this. Lots of marketing, working with PMAs and other partners to kind of spread the word about this type of service, I think is going to be really key to its success. And it's less predictable. So a fixed route, even an infrequent one, comes at set intervals. On demand, because it's on demand, it's a little less predictable. We've set the goal of 30-minute response times, but that could be a 5 minutes, that could be 30 minutes or 25 minutes. So there is sort of, it's a little less predictable than a fixed route bus, but there is the real-time component. So people will be able to track their vehicle in real time, and it's shared ride. I mean, if people are used to taking the bus, this shouldn't bother them, but it does mean that even though you don't have to book ahead, if you do need to get somewhere, you should think ahead a little bit, because if there are other folks on your van or your little bus, you'll have to build that sort of into your travel time. So I'm going to talk about where we're going over the next few months, and then I'll open it up to some questions. So we have a lot of work to do this year. I mean, it's been a pretty mad dash since this project began, and that's not going to change in 2023. We've begun reviewing and sort of I guess, for lack of a better term, aggregating all of the input that we've gotten from our communities, and we've begun the process of updating the draft. So what I just showed you, I believe most of it will stay intact. I think there's some really good stuff there, but we are going to make some revisions based on all the feedback that we've gotten. We are also in the process of building out our schedule for outreach. For the spring, it's going to be a mix again of in-person and virtual stuff. We're always looking to partner with people to do stuff. If you're familiar with what we did last time, we did a bunch of kind of large scale open houses. We did stuff, I think we did a one in Upper Darby at the library there. We did one at Chester City Hall. So we're always trying to find good locations and groups to talk to about the project. We might go back to doing some sort of transit center pop-ups. We have a project bus. We'll try to bring that back, and we'll just do whatever we can to get the word out about the project. Again, make sure people have the opportunity to provide feedback, in whatever means they feel comfortable doing so. That round of engagement we anticipate lasting through May. And then we'll have to begin the process again of going through all of the feedback that we've gotten, organizing it, aggregating it, analyzing it, and updating that draft so that we can begin the process of putting it in final form. Right now, the plan is to finalize everything over the summer and then begin public hearings in the fall. I would plan on September. So, over the next 8 months or so, we'll be taking the project from, an updated draft to a final recommended bus network. In terms of implementation, what we anticipate is that we anticipate phasing this in. Our system is huge. Our system is complicated. We have a lot of capital projects that are outstanding that are impacting sort of when certain pieces would get implemented. Microtransit itself requires phasing because there's procurement involved. There's getting an app on board. There's travel training. There's all different kinds of stuff that we have to deal with regarding the implementation of microtransit. So we are working on a phasing plan, but until we've really solidified kind of what the bus network will look like, or what the new bus network will look like, I think we're sort of, we have a framework, but we have to be flexible in sort of how we figure that out. But my best guess would be we would start phasing in some things this year, very, schedule changes, that type of thing, but most of the realignments of routes and things like that would start in 2024. And that will also be accompanied by a huge communications campaign. We'll be talking to people throughout the process. I like to say where we are now is sort of like a constant state of iteration. We're always sort of going back and forth. We're really trying to get this right. We have to make some changes in the way that we operate the bus system. The bus system as it is currently is not sustainable. So we're committed to making certain changes, but we're committed to working with our customers so that they, at minimum, understand what the changes are and sort of understand what it means to their, daily trip or weekly trip or however often they use the system. So I think that's it for me. Yep, that's it for me. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions y'all have, and I can stop sharing if that's okay.
Well, there's Dan, there's a couple questions in the Q&A. So the first question we have is, do you know how much lead time is typically going to be needed to schedule a microtransit trip?
It's going to depend. I think it's going to be a 30-minute response time. So if you're say you're connecting at a train station, you'd probably want to call it, 5, 10, 15 minutes before you got to your final destination, so that you wait, you don't have to wait that long. So it's really based on the response time, not the lead time. The way we're building it out is that we'll have in each of the zones, our plan is to have kind of a staging area where, it's just easier to get to these central locations and pick people up. We are really looking at travel flows within these zones so that we can best predict how people are going to use this type of service within the zone.
Gotcha. I also got a question here. When you were explaining microtransit, understanding that there are ADA capabilities, does microtransit involve any changes to the current operation of either paratransit or CCT?
So I think it's TBD. I think,
Okay.
we're working with our CCT group. We're trying to understand the impacts of microtransit. We will run a shared, like, commingled system. People will but CCT or paratransit has people need to make different types of trips that they won't necessarily be able to use the microtransit system for. But we are looking to try to build like out a commingled system so people can use both if it's useful for them and that type of thing. It's a really good question. I think it's really the most important. It's the most important component of this, but we have yet to really figure. They need to be commingled, and because CCT is not, like I said, it's not going to be something that's like in the city of Philadelphia, or excuse me, I misspoke. Microtransit is not going to be something that's in the city of Philadelphia. CCT will be in the city of Philadelphia. It is sort of, it serves a different purpose, but we need to be able to use resources to the best of our ability. So it'll be commingled when it can be, but CCT will have to remain a separate service for a multitude of reasons.
Good. Okay. And then a couple questions on the lines that you had on the slide. You showed a 15-minute max from 69th Street to DCCC, Delaware County Community College. Is that the Marple campus? Is that the Marple location?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. And then another question about the Chester designation coming out, Westchester Pike, Chester to wherever. Is that designation from the transportation center, or is it from multiple stops?
I don't think I understand the question.
So when you have a bus route that initiates in Chester and goes, let's say, out to Westchester Pike, out to, you know, Newtown, wherever it's going, is the assumption that that is leaving from the Chester Transportation Center, or could that bus be leaving anywhere in the confines of the city of Chester?
Oh, from the transport. I mean, yeah, I mean, it'll originate from the transportation center.
Okay, perfect.
But then it'll stop. It'll make stops.
Correct. Yes,
Yeah, okay.
Agreed. We're looking at, or some of the communication that we've encountered is explaining the max times, max 15, max 20, max 30. And when it comes to things like schools, that max in terms of getting folks to classes or getting folks to wherever, that's a big understanding in their use of that. So yeah, we can help with that. And then there's another question in the chat that says, if the point of the Cheney microtransit zone is to shuttle people to the Wawa line, it seems a little inequitable that transfers don't apply to regional rail. Would it be possible to discount microtransit price from the price of the regional rail ride? Wouldn't a free transfer be less of a barrier to using that system?
I think that's an awesome question, and I think Mr. Arnold, I'm assuming it's Sam. I think that's a really good point. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know if you're. It doesn't matter. But I agree. We're looking in detail at fare policy right now. If you are familiar with reimagining regional rail, that is looking at sort of operations of our regional rail system, but fares are a big part of that. I think that programming in a free transfer from regional rail to microtransit, I think is a great idea. I think we should 100% do it because we do view it as an important connection. And I don't think it's a heavy lift, but I think it's 100% necessary to the success of microtransit. And actually, I mean, frankly, we should make the transferring free between. That policy should mimic the current bus to rail, bus to high speed policy where it's free. So, but I will make sure that gets sent up the board because I think that's an awesome point.
Perfect. And then one last question that we have in the feature here is, could a meeting be scheduled at DCCC? And just from my perspective, the DCTMA is happy to help in any respect at any of the DCCC campuses. So, you know, Dan, I'm just saying, like, if SEPTA has anything there, we'll join you. Yeah,
we have not fleshed out our plans yet for outreach. I mean, we have kind of a framework that we're working on, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, we'll be, you know, anywhere we need to be to talk to people. So yeah, that would be great. If you want to act as sort of the connective tissue there, Tracy, that would be really helpful.
And I'm going to put it out there. If there are suggestions for additional webinars or outreach or pop-ups, info@dctma.org. Shoot us an email, and we're going to get all of the links out to the attendees of this presentation of the webinar. You will get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. And as the project moves forward, we're going to get information out about future surveys and outreach, etc. So you'll hear all that information through both the TMA and through the chamber. Any other questions that anyone has? Put them in the Q&A. Dan, I'd like to thank you. This is a tremendous amount of information. Looks good. I know that some of the things that have been addressed or changed were things that I had been hearing about from when the bus revolution information originally went out. So a lot of those, that's great information. As you go forward, please keep us informed, and we'll have more of these as is warranted.
No, yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Tracy.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of our friends and thank Trish, thank the chamber staff for helping us, and let everybody know that February 14th at 9 a.m. is the next DCTMA webinar, which will feature information on the Chester Pike multimodal study and also what's happening with the 420 bridge to I-95 in the long term. So thanks for everybody, and we'll see you on the 14th. Bye-bye.